Hey guys, so let's now check out these two exercises that were given in the original calculation video. I will show sort of the lines that would be included in a first run, then also a more shortlisted version of the lines, and then finally maybe also add the move that I personally would play, even though both positions are actually positions where 4 or 5 moves in each case are roughly equal in strength. So if you got a different one, that's absolutely fine. There is no right or wrong in that regard. So this first position, let's apply the scanning method. The first thing we can think of is a king move. Some people, I would say, would add the move like king h8 since you step out of this diagonal, and I think that's fine. Personally, I probably would not add that move because I think that, well, this is a position I play quite often, so I understand opening theory about it. And also in general grounds, I know that we want to address the minor pieces here, development, or even place a rook on the file, on the open file, sooner than we should make prophylactic king moves. So that's the move king h8. Rook e8, definitely a move that I would include. It's the open file, the only open file in the position, so it makes a lot of sense to me. In terms of bishop moves, neither one makes too much sense, but I might include the move bishop c7, since I might set up a battery with queen d7 in the future. When it comes to the queen, I'm not too interested in placing the queen on b6 or a5. I feel that she'll be quite misplaced against this particular structure. But if I had to include one of these two moves, it would be a5, since at least I can transfer the queen over to the king file, to the king side, and maybe, you know, gang up on a point like the h2 point in the future. So definitely, as far as queen moves go, probably the one that I would include is queen c7, since that's a very nice battery here, and we can put a lot of pressure on the h2 pawn and prevent a natural move like castle, which would be met by capturing the pawn immediately. Queen d7 I would not consider, since I frustrate my own development, robbing the minor pieces of an important square. As for the bishop, I would not put it on d7. That's a square, again, that is important for pieces like a knight, and it's also a passive square for the bishop. I would certainly consider bishop e6, threatening to capture this bishop and offering an exchange, which would improve or potentially improve my pawn structure. Also, bishop f5 is a good diagonal here, the b1 to h7 diagonal. And bishop g4 creates a pin, so I would certainly consider that move as well. As for the other minor pieces, I would consider both knight moves. Knight a6 might at first sight appear like a silly move, but we can actually reroute that knight to c7. And from there, the knight threatens to jump to very good squares. So I would add knight a6 to my list. Finally, of course, the rook cannot move, so I think that covers, I hope I haven't missed any, but I think that covers all the pieces. In terms of the pawns, I would maybe consider, no, I would not consider any pawn moves here, just because I don't want to impact my structure, though I understand if some people might choose a move like h6, figuring that they might want to create some luft for the king. As far as pawn moves, the first pawn that I scanned that maybe is interesting is the f-pawn. Placing it on f5 might create some possibilities like transferring the knight to f6, as well as opening this diagonal for the queen. So f5 I would consider. c5 certainly I would consider. It strikes the center, and it also develops the knight on c6, so it kind of intuitively makes sense to me to add to my list. b6 or b5 I would certainly consider both. b5 because it hits the bishop, and b6 because it allows me the possibility of planting my bishop on this long diagonal. Additionally, it also allows the possibility of some bishop a6 move, challenging this bishop and potentially swapping off, or if not swapping off, if white drops back, then I have a bishop on a6, which may actually turn out to be a really good diagonal to have the bishop on. So this is sort of the moves that I would consider in terms of pawn moves. Quick scan of the a-pawn, not attracted to either of these two moves. I don't think they do anything to improve my position. So that's more or less my list built. And then if I had to whittle it down, I would prioritize based on my understanding of chess in general, if I don't know opening theory, or of the I can of course just rely on memory if I happen to have studied, what is the exact best move here. But if I'm just basing myself on general understanding, I would probably prioritize either the development of the minor pieces or placement on that open file, or prophylactic play in the sense that we anticipate his move might be to castle. We know that's a key objective for him in the opening, and we try and frustrate that possibility for him. So for me, that's my whittled down list. Some knight move, probably to a6 actually, because I really like this c7 square to control the really nice squares, whereas if I put it on d7, where am I jumping to next in the center? So probably I would consider this plan. And then besides that, probably a bishop move, I would consider bishop f5. So I would say bishop f5, knight a6 if I make a bishop or knight move, queen c7 if I make a queen move, or rook e8 if I choose to move my rook. So that would be my whittled down list. And then I choose from there. Not as attracted to pawn moves, but if I had to play a pawn move, probably c5, so that I pressure the center, and also knight c6. So in terms of if I have to absolutely play one move right now, probably I think a flexible one that I quite like, that is a little bit annoying to deal with, is the move queen c7 here. Because I know white wants to castle, and if there's one thing master level players are used to doing, is trying to sort of annoy the opponent as much as possible. Figure out what they want to do and try and make life as hard as they can for them. So that is that when it comes to this particular exercise. Let's take a look at the second one. So when it comes to this second one, again, we use the same method. The rook move, any move that I would include? No, there's only one move, rook g8. Seems a little bit silly. I probably want to castle soon. So no rook move. Bishop move, cannot play anything. This bishop on f5, certainly capturing one of the moves that I would consider first, especially because if we take and put the knight on f5, something like this, it's a very natural development scheme. However, I would also consider all the additional bishop moves, since they all have their merits. For example, bishop g6 allows me to develop my knight while still keeping the bishops on the board. Bishop g4 creates a pin. Bishop e4 invites a structure change that might potentially benefit me, because if he moves his knight, maybe we can grab this pawn. At least I'm going to investigate this possibility. So that goes into the list. When it comes to the pieces on the e-file, this knight, I definitely don't want to move it, because wherever I go, what's going to happen is that if I do move this knight, he's going to take here, and after it takes, I'm going to have this bad pawn structure. I really don't want that. So therefore, I'm ruling out knight moves very quickly. King moves I'm also ruling out, unless my intention is to, troll my opponent with some sort of king dance. But I guess that's probably not going to happen most of the time, at least not in a serious game. Well, queen moves, d7, b6 are probably the only ones that I will give some thought to. c7 or c8, I'm not a fan of, because I don't want to put my queen on the c-file. b8 I'm not a fan of, because the queen just feels very badly placed here relative to the structure. And a5, frankly, is also not such a great square, since I'm hitting here and I'm on this diagonal and I'm on this rank. But there's not much going on in all of those lines of the board. So probably queen d7 or queen b6 I would add to the list. And as for rook moves, the open file is the only one that catches my eye, rook c8. I think the other moves, rook a7 and rook b8, are just too passive. So that's my sort of more comprehensive list. I hope I haven't missed any piece. When it comes to pawn moves, I would say maybe h6. Nothing else is attractive to me. I don't want to move this pawn because it's a key defender of important dark squares like f6. I don't want to push this pawn 2 squares either, because again, dark squares would be weak, whereas if I push here, I control this square. I don't want to push this pawn because after a quick sequence like this, I've really fractured my king safety as a result of the structure, and I'm in the center of the board and he's here on g1, so I will quickly discard that option. And I also don't really want to push any of these pawns, because I like the way these pawns are set up. The b7 pawn defends my knight and my a6 pawn, while the a6 pawn covers the b5 square, which might be useful to white. So based on my understanding of the position, the only pawn move that I would add to the list is h6. But again, that's where the subjective element comes into play. If you, for example, have not studied this position as much, let's say, and you added the move f6 to your list, that's not a bad thing. It's just, that's a process. You add your moves, and if you then decide you whittle it down and you finally leave yourself at f6 the best move, you can then actually analyze that one and then look at the alternatives you discarded and try to understand, well, why did I discard these? Why was it that what I thought was the right choice turned out to be the wrong choice? And this is really how we learn, right? We have ideas, we test them out in the real world, or in this case in the chessboard, and then we get feedback. And very often we got to deal with the ego blow of the feedback being, your move was not that great, right? The ruthless silicon engine, our silicon friends, right? The ruthless computer engines, they don't care about our feelings, so they'll tell us. But that's the way we improve. So f6 here, interesting if you added the move, but overall, I think the only pawn move that's attractive to me is h6. Apart from this, I think I want to say what I would probably do in this position, which is to capture this bishop here. And after queen takes bishop, I would then just put the knight on f5. I think that's simple and gives us a good position with easy development to follow. However, there are many good moves in this position. Knight b4 is quite a good one, just putting pressure on that bishop and inviting him to trade instead of us trading. Bishop g6 back makes a lot of sense as well, threatening to put the knight on f5. And yeah, even moves like queen b6 here, putting pressure on the center and on the undefended b2 pawn is also quite attractive. So if you got any of those moves as your final decision in this position, I would say those are very good. And in fact, there's a few other very good moves in this position for black. So the main purpose is the scanning method, and were you able to apply it? Did you find it helpful? Please leave any feedback at all that you would like to leave in the comment section. If you did like this video, follow up then to the first video, then please also give a like. And of course, if you want to see more of this content and the remainder of the series, then perhaps if you have not already done so, you can consider subscribing to our channel here on YouTube. So that's it for me for this video, and I shall see you in the next one.